It's 3 o'clock in the morning. The blue light from the phone cuts through the darkness of the room. Someone is editing the same photo for the 10th time. They adjust the filter, correct the lighting, try to capture that angle that makes everything look perfect. The face on the screen looks almost unrecognizable, more beautiful, younger, more interesting than the person who created it. There is a specific kind of fatigue that comes from this quest. It is not physical. It is deeper, more insidious. It is the exhaustion of someone who spends their entire life as the director, actor, and audience of a movie that never ends. A movie where every scene must be flawless. Every line of dialogue must generate reactions. Every moment must be worth a like. The most disturbing thing is that it works, at least for a few seconds. The photo is posted. Notifications start flashing. A momentary relief spreads through your chest. That brief addictive feeling of being seen, approved, validated. But 200 likes later, the emptiness returns. Greater, more hungry. There is something deeply wrong with this equation. More exposure should mean more connection. More visibility should generate less loneliness. More recognition should build more self-esteem. But modern emotional mathematics defies all logic. The more someone shows themselves, the less they seem to actually exist. This contradiction has a name. It is not vanity. It is much more complex. It is the digital reissue of an ancient tragedy, a myth that has been repeated for millennia, but which has taken on frightening dimensions in the age of smartphones. The story of someone who starved to death in front of a banquet, who wasted away from thirst beside a fountain, who gradually disappeared in a desperate attempt to be seen. The young Narcissus was not vain, he was needy, and his downfall was not due to excessive self-love, but to the devastating absence of real love. He did not celebrate his image, he was a prisoner of it. Just like millions today who confuse digital performance with authentic existence, who exchange real presence for virtual presence, who have turned their own lives into a product to be constantly optimized for the consumption of others. What happens when someone lives only to be seen? When external validation becomes the only emotional fuel? When the reflection in the digital mirror matters more than who is really behind the screen? The answer has been in a water source for over 2,000 years. And what it reveals about human nature can completely change the way we see our relationship with our own image. Narcissus looks at the surface of the water and sees the most beautiful face he has ever contemplated. He does not know that it is his own reflection. He reaches out to touch it and the image fades away. He waits for the water to calm down and there it is again. Perfect, unattainable, seductive. He tries to kiss it and loses everything again. With each attempt at real contact, the image disappears. With each pause, it returns, as beautiful and impossible as before. This tragic dance between desire and frustration repeats itself every second on billions of screens around the world. Someone posts a photo and waits. The likes start to come in, 1, 5, 50. Each notification is like the face in the water, beautiful, validating, but dissolving the moment we try to touch it for real. Because a like is not a hug, a comment is not a conversation, a follower is not a friend. The digital reflection promises everything the reflection in the fountain promised: recognition, admiration, love. But just like the image in the water, it never responds back. No matter how many times someone refreshes the feed, how many times they check the metrics, how many times they try to perfect the angle, what returns is always an echo, never a true response. Narcissus was not in love with himself. He was desperate for connection. The face in the water seemed to look back, seemed to want to speak, seemed to promise reciprocity. It was the perfect illusion of not being alone. Just as the smartphone today offers the perfect illusion of constant companionship. Thousands of faces on the timeline, dozens of open conversations on WhatsApp, hundreds of stories to watch, and yet a deafening silence inside. There is a specific cruelty in this illusion. The reflection in the water was at least static. It appeared and disappeared as Narcissus approached or moved away. There was a logic, a predictability. The digital reflection is infinitely more sadistic. It changes constantly. One moment it responds with dozens of likes, the next it ignores you completely. One post goes viral, the next goes unnoticed. There is no pattern, no guarantee. It's an emotional casino game where we never know when the next prize will come. This unpredictability is more addictive than any drug. Narcissus at least knew where to find his source. Those addicted to digital validation never know when it will arrive. The smartphone becomes a slot machine that we carry in our pockets. With each pull, that is each time we unlock the screen, we may hit the emotional jackpot, or we may get nothing. The tragedy is not in technology, it is in substitution. When digital connection begins to take the place of human connection. When virtual validation becomes more important than real acceptance. When the applause of strangers matters more than the gaze of those who really know us. The reflection on the screen becomes more interesting than the real person outside of it. That's why someone can be surrounded by thousands of followers and still wake up every morning with a nameless weight on their chest. That's why a photo with lots of likes can bring less joy than a sincere compliment from someone who matters. That's why, even with all the communication technology that has been invented, modern loneliness is deeper than that of any previous generation. There are people who know the digital version of themselves better than the real version. They know exactly which angle works best, which light flatters their face, which pose generates the most engagement. They spend hours studying their own metrics like a scientist studies data. But if you ask them what they really feel, what they really want, who they really are when no one is looking, silence ensues. The reflection in the water was mute. It couldn't answer Narcissus' questions. It couldn't comfort him. It couldn't offer what he really sought, to be known by someone real. The reflection on the screen is also silent. No matter how sophisticated the algorithm, no matter how personalized the experience seems, there is no soul on the other side. There is only the echo of one's own need, multiplied in likes, shares, and empty comments. But there is something even more disturbing in this equation. Narcissus at least did not know he was in love with his own reflection. The discovery of the illusion could have been his salvation. Today, most people know perfectly well that they are looking at a screen, that they are interacting with avatars, that they are constructing an edited version of themselves for public consumption. And yet they cannot stop, because what is at stake is not ignorance, it is addiction. The digital reflection has become the only way for many to recognize themselves as existing. Without likes, without views, without engagement, the feeling is one of gradual disappearance. As if real life were not enough to confirm that we are alive. As if we needed the constant approval of strangers to be sure that we exist. And when someone tries to step away, when they decide to do a digital detox or disappear from social media for a while, the emptiness that arises is almost unbearable. There are no more numbers to check, no more metrics to track, no more instant feedback to validate every thought, every decision, every moment. It's as if the person simply ceased to exist. The silence is deafening. Echo was a nymph who lost the ability to speak on her own. Condemned by the gods to only repeat the last word she heard, she became a prisoner of other people's language. When Narcissus shouted, "Who's there?" she replied, "There." When he asked, "Why do you run away from me?" she echoed, "From me." Her voice existed, but it no longer belonged to her. There is something devastatingly familiar about this condemnation. How many conversations today are just collages of ready-made phrases, slang that everyone uses, opinions that have been copied from influencers who also copied them from others. Language has become a system of echoes where one rarely hears a genuinely original voice. Someone says that's right without knowing exactly what that is. Another responds perfect, without feeling any perfection. They are orphaned words, floating from mouth to mouth like emotional viruses. The nymph Echo desperately desired Narcissus, but could only repeat his words. She couldn't declare her love in her own words, couldn't tell her story, couldn't reveal who she really was behind the repetition. She just echoed, until this inability to express herself authentically consumed her completely. She disappeared, leaving only her voice, a voice without an owner, without a soul, without uniqueness. This is the modern tragedy of communication. Millions of people have access to platforms of expression that their grandparents never dreamed of. But what they express are pasteurized versions of themselves. The fear of displeasing, of not being understood, of being left out of the conversation makes many prefer to repeat what they already know works rather than risk saying something genuine. Some people spend hours thinking about the perfect caption for a photo, but never devote the same time to reflecting on what they really think or feel. Some people know all the internet slang, but have lost touch with their own emotional vocabulary. Some people are fluent in memes, but stutter when they need to express a true feeling. The algorithm rewards repetition. Content that has already become a trending topic is more likely to go viral again. Phrases that have already been tested and approved by the public generate more engagement. Innovation is risk. Originality is uncertainty. It is safer to echo than to speak. Easier to like than to create. More comfortable to repeat than to reveal. And so, like Echo, many are losing their own voice. Not literally, they can still speak. But the essence of what they say no longer comes from within, but from outside. Political opinions copied from commentators. Life philosophy extracted from motivational posts. Humor based on jokes that have already circulated 1,000 times. Even indignation becomes performative, a repetition of other people's indignation. The most disturbing thing is how this process happens gradually, almost imperceptibly. No one wakes up one day deciding to abandon their own voice. It is a slow erosion, a compromise here, a concession there. First, you avoid expressing a controversial opinion so as not to cause trouble. Then you adopt a phrase you saw somewhere because it sounded smart. Next, you realize that it is easier to share someone else's thoughts than to formulate your own. There is a specific loneliness in this condition. It is the loneliness of someone who is always talking but never really saying anything of their own. It's like being at a party where everyone is talking at the same time, but no one is really conversing. There is noise, there is movement, there is the illusion of communication, but there is a lack of substance, a lack of connection, a lack of truth. Who still remembers the last time they said something completely original? Something that was born from your own reflection, your own experience, your own pain or joy, that was not inspired by any post, any video, any catchphrase seen somewhere. Originality has become so rare that when it does appear, it sounds almost alien. Echo did not disappear all at once. It was a gradual disappearance. First, he lost the ability to start conversations, then to respond with his own words. Finally, all that remained was the function of repeating. His identity was eroded by the impossibility of expressing himself authentically until there was nothing left but the function, to echo. The parallel with digital communication is chilling. First, someone stops sharing controversial opinions to avoid conflict. Then they start using only phrases that they know will be well received. Next, they develop an automatic repertoire of responses. Love it. Perfect. Exactly. Finally, even feelings begin to be outsourced. Instead of processing an experience and finding their own words to describe it, they look for the story of someone who has been through the same situation and copy their reaction. Communication becomes a representation of communication. Someone doesn't say how they feel. They post a meme that represents how they feel. They don't express love. They send a romantic GIF. They don't elaborate on a thought. They share a quote that says something similar to what they would like to say. Mediation replaces expression. The symbol replaces the experience. If this resonates somewhere inside you, perhaps it is because there is still a voice there waiting to be heard. A voice that no longer wants to repeat but to speak. A voice that is tired of echoing and finally wants to say something of its own. Echo loved Narcissus, but Narcissus didn't even know she existed. He was too absorbed in his own image to notice that there was someone there, desperately trying to communicate. Today, while millions are mesmerized by their own timelines, how many real voices are trying to express themselves and being ignored? How many echoes are screaming into the digital void, repeating empty phrases in the hope that someone will finally hear not what they repeat, but who they really are? Echo's condemnation was cruel, but at least she knew she was repeating. Modern condemnation can be worse. Repeating without realizing it, echoing without awareness, gradually disappearing while thinking you are communicating better than ever. Narcissus couldn't tear himself away from the fountain. Every attempt to leave resulted in a desperate return. It was no longer a choice. It was compulsion. His own image had become his prison. He did not eat, sleep, or live. He only contemplated, in an exhausting vigil that consumed his vital forces drop by drop. The myth records his slow deterioration, his skin losing color, his body wasting away, his youth fading while he remained captive to his own reflection. There is a specific fatigue that arises from the constant need to be a performative version of oneself. It is not physical tiredness. It is an existential exhaustion that corrodes from within. It is the exhaustion of those who spend the entire day being actors, directors, and critics of their own lives, transforming every moment into potential content, every experience into a possible post, every feeling into a caption. Digital performance allows no breaks. There is no time to rest, no backstage where you can take off your mask. The stage is permanent, the audience never leaves, the show must go on. Waking up means thinking about the first story. Having coffee becomes a photo. Leaving the house requires a costume. Meeting friends turns into a photo shoot. Sleeping is preceded by analyzing the day's metrics. Even dreams begin to be polluted by imaginary notifications. Some people have developed a strange anxiety, the inability to live a moment without documenting it. A sunset must be photographed, a meal must be recorded, a feeling must be accompanied by a hashtag. As if the experience were not real until validated by the screen. As if life needed captions to make sense. Narcissus wasted away because all his vital energy was being drained to maintain a relationship that nourished no one. His beauty, which should have been a source of joy and connection, had become a vampire that sucked his essence. Today, identity itself has become that vampire. The version carefully constructed for the digital world consumes more energy than it generates satisfaction, because maintaining a consistent persona is a full-time job. Every word must be aligned with the image one wants to project. Every photo must tell the right story. Every interaction must reinforce the chosen character. Some people have several drafts of responses to comments, calculating which version will sound most spontaneous. Some rehearse smiles in the mirror before recording a casual video. Modern performance requires surgical precision. It's not enough to post a beautiful photo. It needs to have the right filter, The perfect lighting, the flattering angle, the engaging caption. It's not enough to tell a story. It needs to have a beginning, middle, end, and preferably a moral that resonates with the audience. Even sadness needs to be photogenic. Even vulnerability needs to be palatable. There is a type of digital schizophrenia where someone lives two lives simultaneously, the real one and the performative one. In real life, they may be experiencing financial difficulties, relationship problems, existential crises. In their performative life, everything is always under control, always improving, always blessed. The distance between these two versions can become so great that the person loses touch with which one is real. The irony is that the more someone tries to appear authentic, the less authentic they become. Performed authenticity is a contradiction in itself. It's like trying to be spontaneous while following a script. The effort to appear natural results in artificiality. The attempt to sound true produces falsehood. It is impossible to be genuine when you are constantly calculating how your genuineness will be received. Narcissus's body began to reflect the emptiness of his obsession. His outer beauty remained, but there was no longer any life behind it. He was a beautiful shell housing a spirit that was dying of emotional starvation. How many profiles today are exactly that? Impeccable feeds masking empty lives, photoshopped smiles hiding real depression, fabricated successes covering up intimate failures. Maintaining the ideal image requires constant sacrifice. Time that could be spent on real relationships is sacrificed. Money is sacrificed on clothes, products, experiences that serve more to feed the feed than to nourish the soul. Sleep is sacrificed to respond to comments. Peace of mind is sacrificed to monitor metrics. Privacy is sacrificed to maintain relevance. But the cruelest sacrifice is that of one's own personality. Aspects that don't sell well are gradually suppressed. Vulnerabilities are edited out. Complexities are simplified. Contradictions are eliminated. The real person, with all their nuances, imperfections, and depths, is trimmed down until they fit into the perfect digital frame. There are people who are afraid to appear in unplanned photos, who panic when someone posts an unfiltered image of them, who feel naked when they cannot control how they are being seen. The unedited version of themselves has become a source of anxiety, as if the real person were an imperfect draft of the digital version. Narcissus did not die of sadness. He died of exhaustion. The myth makes it clear it was not a dramatic end, but a gradual wasting away. His life force was sucked away by the obsessive contemplation of an image that promised everything but offered nothing in return. Today, millions are living less extreme versions of the same exhaustion, spending emotional energy on virtual relationships that do not feed them back. What happens when all of a person's energy is directed toward maintaining an image? When there is no time or strength left to cultivate the substance behind the appearance? When the performance becomes so demanding that there is no energy left to truly live? The answer lies in the reflection that does not leave the source, in the image that becomes more important than the person who created it. In the end, Narcissus understood. The realization came when it was too late. The words Ovid gave him were devastating. Unhappy it is myself. I understand now, and my image does not deceive me. I burn with love for myself. I light and feel the fire. It was the awareness of the illusion arising at the moment when there was no longer the strength to escape it. There is a refined cruelty in this belated revelation. Lucidity arriving when the body no longer responds, when obsession has consumed everything that was alive. Narcissus finally saw that he was in love with a mirage, but his vital energy had already been drained by sterile contemplation. The truth arrived like a poisoned gift, enlightening but useless. How many today experience this same revelation in slow motion? They realize they are addicted to their own digital image, but they can't stop photographing themselves. They recognize that social media makes them unhappy, but they can't stop checking their notifications. They know they are living an edited version of themselves, but they have lost touch with who they really are behind the filters. The modern tragedy of narcissism is not ignorance, it is paralyzing knowledge. It is knowing that something is wrong, but being deeply addicted to what causes the problem. It is like Narcissus saying it is myself while continuing to look at the fountain. Awareness of one's own illusion is not enough to break it when it has become the only known way of existing. Narcissus died of unrequited love for himself. It seems paradoxical, but it makes tragic sense. He loved an idealized version of himself that could not return real affection. Just as today millions love their own digital personas, carefully constructed versions that can receive likes but cannot hug back, that can generate admiration but cannot offer comfort. That may seem perfect but cannot bleed when wounded. Narcissus' death was not sudden. It was a gradual decline, a slow erosion of his ability to live outside the contemplation of his own image. First, he lost his appetite for simple things. Then, his interest in other faces. Next, his ability to exist away from the source. Finally, even his will to continue existing, except to maintain an obsessive vigil over his own reflection. The myth records that even as he was dying, Narcissus continued to look at his image. Until his last breath, he could not look away. And when the nymphs came to collect the body for the funeral, they found only a flower where he had fallen. A white flower with a golden center, beautiful but mute, perfect but lifeless, eternal but incapable of love. This final transformation is the most powerful metaphor in the myth. Narcissus did not disappear, he became decoration. His human essence, with all its complexity, imperfection, and capacity for real connection, was replaced by something aesthetically pleasing but emotionally dead. The person became an ornament. The human being became a landscape. How many digital biographies are exactly that today? Profiles that look like well-kept gardens, but where there is no real life. Impeccable timelines that function as beautiful tombstones for people who still breathe but no longer live. Feeds that are museums of one's own image, where each photo is a piece on display and the curator is trapped inside the exhibition itself. The flower that grew in Narcissus's place was not a reward. It was an epitaph, an aesthetic memorial to someone who chose beauty over life. And that flower continues to grow. In every selfie taken at 3 in the morning. In every story crafted to look spontaneous. In every moment of real life sacrificed to feed an image that is never satisfied. The myth ends in silence. There is no explicit moral, no clear lesson. Just the disturbing image of a lonely flower where once there was a young man full of life. Beauty remained, but humanity was lost. The form survived, but the soul evaporated. Perhaps this is the most uncomfortable truth that the myth reveals. It is possible to die little by little while still alive. It is possible to waste away from loneliness amid thousands of admirers. It is possible to become an ornamental version of oneself, beautiful for others to look at, but empty for oneself to inhabit. Narcissus did not need to die. He only needed to have lifted his eyes from the fountain once. He only needed to have noticed Echo, who was calling him desperately. He only needed to have chosen the imperfection of real life over the perfection of the image. But the fountain was too hypnotic, the image too seductive, the illusion too comfortable. The fountain is still there. It has only changed shape. Now it fits in your pocket and flashes notifications. And the question that has echoed since Ovid's time remains the same. What will remain when the screen goes dark? What do you do when no one is looking? Write in the comments. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and truly apply this knowledge to your life, the codes of the White Rabbit are ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.